All right, and hello to all of our chamber influencers. This is our Wednesday training session, which is there for you every Wednesday so that we can carry you along the way to learning how to work your best or be a partner with the Chamber of Commerce. Today, we've got a little bit different twist to that, and that's coming from our special guest, which is Mike Szczesniak. Mike is, among other things, he's the president and chief coach of the Results Engine, which is he helps his clients with boost productivity and performance in life and in business. And not to mention, he's also a competitive power lifter. So he's got everything going on in a full circle, along with a couple of dogs which need to lose weight, which we have already talked about. But that being said, and our day running forward, I'm going to feature Mike here and let Mike get started. Here you are, Mike.
Awesome. Christopher, thanks again. Appreciate it. It's been awesome to kind of connect with everybody so far on before we press record. And I'm excited to jump in. And what we're going to do is, like Christopher mentioned, so really brief intro before I jump into these slides. Like, I'm a high performance coach, and all that means is helping people succeed above standard norms consistently over the long term. So I joked in like an intro video that I put in the group, in the Facebook group, that people always confuse me with a fitness entrepreneur. And a lot of that is because, most of my network is from the fitness industry, just because it's been a huge piece of my life for over a decade. But I'm also a competitive power lifter, like Christopher mentioned, and I'll kind of jump into that a little bit in the slides. But what we're going to do today is I have some slides from a webinar I used to run. I think it'd be super valuable for this audience. So for all of you guys, so I'm excited to share it with you. And so I'll share my screen. We'll jump through those slides and really firm up on the points that I think are super valuable for you guys. I know that there's a big focus on, working with the Chamber of Commerce and all these things. So how we can leverage these skill sets to boost your performance in all those areas that can then help you get better results and everything that all the other incredible guests share with you guys. So we'll jump through that. And then I want to just make sure, honestly, that I want to make sure there's a ton of time for Q&A. So no one's leaving here without getting all your questions answered. And then, like Christopher mentioned, I got a little surprise for you guys at the end. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we can jump in. All right. Can you guys see that? Okay.
Mm-hmm. We're in good shape.
Cool. Awesome. So, like I mentioned, my name is Mike Szczesniak, certified high performance coach. I'm certified through a company called the High Performance Institute, which we'll dive into in a little bit. But what we want to talk about is the 6 secrets of the world's most successful people, like what they know that we don't and how they leverage it to get better results. Because at the end of the day, we all have 24 hours in every single day with the exception of 2, the day we come into the world and the day we leave it. So what sets us apart from someone that's either doing way less or way more, right? It's how we maximize that time and how we show up. So we're going to jump into that for the next, 30 minutes or so. So just some housekeeping. And again, these slides are from a webinar, so not all of it will make sense. So forgive me as I'm like, just ignore that or whatever it may be. But so we're going to jump into why most people fail, the science of high performance, some results from my life. So it kind of helps bring, I hate that part because I don't like to make this about me, but it's important to illustrate how this impacted my life in particular and why I love this space. The 6 pillars of high performance, and then game plan and giveaway. These are kind of old and stale, so I'll share all that stuff with you after. So what we want to talk about in the next, block of time is, again, the question is, what do the world's highest performing, most successful, and most fulfilled people do differently, right? We have the same amount of time, but why are they achieving all of these levels of success that they dream of and boosting their fulfillment and their happiness and overall life? Like, what is different? And that's what we're going to dive into in the next, I got to pick a time and just go with it because I've used that phrase like 4 times and I keep stumbling on my words, but we'll go with 30 minutes because clearly it's not easy. Because if it was easy, everybody would have done it. We'd all have, like, you wouldn't be on this call right now. Your business would be going as well as you want. Your health would be in top levels. Like your relationships would be amazing, and you wouldn't need to dive in and build more relationships and try and learn and grow. Right. But there are three huge, awful, debilitating problems when it comes to this work. Fear, right? Fear is, and I talked about this in that intro video in the Facebook group. Like my first ever program I created is called Fear Hacking Academy, because fear it's an emotion. And honestly, when it comes down to our decision making, it usually comes down to pain versus pleasure. And the unfortunate fact of the matter is that running away from pain is far more powerful than running towards or being pulled by pleasure. Reason being, we have a 2,000-year-old brain, and we're wired to, when we're around the corner from a saber-toothed tiger, we're wired to run. We're not wired to think and process all these decisions, because then we would have gotten eaten, right? That part of our brain hasn't really evolved over the last 2,000 years. So fear can be a huge problem if we don't know how to leverage it. Next one's fatigue, right? We go through a huge work day, and especially when you're getting a business off the ground, like sometimes you're going to have to put in 10, 12, 14-hour days, and that can be strenuous. And if you can't manage fatigue properly, you're not going to be able to break your way through and get to that state of momentum that every business is striving for. And then finally is frustration, right? We're not going to always get the results we want. Or if we have to work with people, maybe people don't show up the way they need to, or they don't fulfill what they promise. All these frustrations that if we don't know how to manage them, all of a sudden they're going to port over into many different areas of life. It'll have a negative effect of, our time in the gym. If you're frustrated, maybe you're not going to wake up in the morning and go to the gym, and your health takes a hit. Or maybe you show up after work and, you get back home and you're super frustrated from the day of work, and you let that anger and that frustration port over into the dinner time conversation. And it starts to play a role in your personal relationships, right? So these are three areas that are huge problems for people. So again, the question becomes, how do the world's most successful people, how do they overcome fear, fatigue, and frustration and implement the right strategies and habits to dramatically improve everything that they're striving for, right? I'm going to move this Zoom window because it's blocking there we go. Awesome. The window is like blocking some of the slides. So I want to just move that a little bit to advance their lives and careers, right? And that's what we're really talking about. But housekeeping, this is kind of irrelevant. This is for a replay, or this is for a webinar, so let's ignore this stuff. And I want to start with this, guys. Skepticism is amazing. Like, I want you to question every single thing that I say. It's cool to question anything I say. Just ask yourself this question: is this true or important in my life right now? Right? Like, what would happen if I really focused on this area? Think beyond yourself. Think about how might improvement in these areas, how might it help me? And not only me, but also my family, my team, my career, my mission, and my overall life goals, right? Because at the end of the day, like, what I'm sharing, a lot of it is science and things of that nature, but a lot of that is my perception and my opinion of these things. So it's always important to question. I remember I was at a point early in my journey where, right out of college, I was starting my career in corporate America, and I was consuming information from everywhere, right? Just personal development, trying to read everything I could. And I hit this point where two people that I was consuming the most from, a gentleman named Grant Cardone, who's a big guy in sales and real estate, and a gentleman named Gary Vaynerchuk, who's big in social media marketing. They're both very raw, unfiltered type of personalities. And I remember vividly watching an interview where they said the exact opposite thing about the same topic. And at that point, I realized that, what they're sharing is not the truth, it's their truth. So it was a really powerful lesson, because it's like, always question what you're doing, but I'm trying to apply to it to your own growth and what you're doing in your life right now. So skepticism is amazing. Just reframe it with those questions is all that I ask. So when it comes to this work, like, who is it not going to help? It's not going to help the yeah guy who knows everything but doesn't have the discipline to truly implement with consistency and excellence. Okay, it's not going to help the excuse guy who always finds a reason not to take action, right? You have an excuse for every potential solution. Okay, and it's not going to help the fear guy who won't try new things, right? And I want to put an asterisk on this last one, because it's not going to help the fear guy who won't try new things and isn't willing to work on it. It will help the fear guy who, maybe is just struggling a little bit from fear and is willing to learn how to leverage that fear and continue to take action and break through that wall. So that's kind of a different conversation. And if that is you, reach out to me afterwards, because I have a different piece of information or a different like kind of subset of information that might be valuable. And it's not going to help the I don't want change guy who's just trapped and is not willing to change and evolve. I think if anything, we've kind of seen this massively over the last couple of years. Just business is changing, the world is changing, right? And look at this. We're all across the US and in Canada on this call in particular, with me sharing my screen in this little office in Westchester, New York, right? It's wild what is possible right now. And building business online should be the exact example of why we need to change. So if you're that I don't want change guy, this isn't going to help you. And, no disrespect. I just might not be the trainer for you. So back to our quest. The question is, what do the world's highest performing, most successful, most fulfilled people, what do they do differently? Okay. So it's always a good start, or always a good starting point to think about what's not working. Now, you probably already do a lot of this stuff, and most of it is great to start, right? It's great to get that initial boost, that initial bit of success, but it's not sufficient when it comes to long-term success. Like these dreams that we're striving for, we're going to need something more. So you've probably heard these things like, oh, you just got to start, or, you got to work hard, or you got to be passionate, or, focus on your strengths, throw everything else out, or practice a lot, be grateful, stick to it. Like all these things, they're great pieces of advice. But when it comes to long-term success, you're going to need something more. These alone will not suffice. So how do you reach that next level of abundant success while avoiding burnout and false obligations? And that's what we're going to dive into today. So what I want to talk to you about today is it's really based on the world's largest study of high performers, the biggest study in the history of the world. I mentioned earlier, I'm certified through a company called the High Performance Institute. And this is the company that ran this study. So let's jump into the science about this study. You may recognize this gentleman on it's to the left of my screen. I think it's the left of your screen. I got really messed up because I was doing like a Facebook Live in my inner circle yesterday, and I kept pointing the wrong direction and saying, I don't know, the inversion of the camera messed me up. But Brennan Burchard is the world's leading high performance coach. He's the CEO of the High Performance Institute, highest paid high performance coach in the world. He's worked with people like Oprah and Usher and all of these A-list celebrities. He's the author of a book in the top right corner, High Performance Habits. We're going to dive into a lot of that book as well. He's a 3-time New York Times bestseller. He's got 10 million fans on Facebook, 200 million video views. He's ranked one of the most influential leaders in personal growth by the Oprah Winfrey Network and Success Magazine. He's the world's leading high performance coach. So this study, it began to answer a couple different questions. First one is, why do some individuals and teams succeed more quickly than others and sustain that success over the long term? Because again, high performance is consistently over the long term, right? Next question was, of those who pull it off, why are some miserable, why others are happy on their journey, right? Sure, we all know that person who is wildly successful, maybe on a financial status, but their personal life is in shambles, or maybe their relationship is in shambles. So like, why are some able to pull it off and have all the pieces together while some don't? Number 3 is, what motivates people to reach for higher levels of success in the first place? And what kinds of habits, training, and support really help them to continue to improve? So let's dive into a little bit of this study. And here's how the High Performance Institute found these answers. They did global surveys. They did structured one-on-one interviews. They had tons of data analytics, academic literature review. They had coaching insights from over 3,000 high-performance coaching sessions, and they had empirical results from training. So of all of this data, they had 1 million HPI assessments, 300,000 organizational employees, 1.6 million online students, 2 million newsletter subscribers, 10 million Facebook followers, 100 million video views and comments. All of this went into this study. And the question was, which performance variables help the most or help achieve long-term success the most? So they started with over 100 performance variables. And for the record, I'm going to dive into this a little bit, but I'm an engineer by trade, so I geek out to this stuff. I love the science that kind of drives a lot of what we do and how it all works. So I might just go on really passionate rants, and I'm already from New York, so I talk really, really fast. So feel free to drop questions in the comments if I overlook something, or if you want me to go into more detail. And like Christopher mentioned, we'll jump into all those questions afterwards. But started with over 100 performance variables. And as they had a bunch of filters that we put them through. Like, we wanted to find things that were deliberate, things that were observable, malleable, trainable. Like, are these things that we're born with, or can we actually build these habits? And this all boiled down to 6 habits. Okay, so the 6 high performance habits, they're personal and social. There's 3 of each. And the first one is seeking clarity, right? This is what we call the cornerstone habit. Think of it like a rising tide. When you have clarity, everything rises. But when you don't, everything kind of falls back a little bit, right? Next one is generating energy. People think, you could think about this as, I always joke about this because in a previous life, I was a software engineer, and I have that side of my life and I have the fitness side of my life. Both are heavily driven by caffeine and stimulants, right? In the programming language I used to work in was Java, right? The running joke used to be that engineers turn coffee into code. And then on the fitness side, you have super driven by like pre-workout, all the garbage that goes into those supplements. And I never understood that you could actually, the answer to generating energy wasn't always get a cup of coffee, right? Sometimes you could just boost your overall nutrition to get more energy, or you could do some breathing exercises to get more energy. So amazing, amazing stuff. Next one is raising necessity. Christopher, we were talking about this before we pressed record. This idea that something comes into your life, makes something absolutely necessary, and then your execution on it and your production and performance goes through the roof, right? Raising necessity is something that that high performers, they just do it more often. So after that is increasing productivity. I love productivity. For me, and I'll dive into my story in a little bit, but for me, productivity, I always joke that it was kind of like my gateway drug into high performance. And I'll explain that in a little bit. Next one is developing influence. People who are just wildly successful and high performing in all different areas, they're just remarkably influential with their teams, their relationships, their family members, their friends, people in their circle, their social media audiences, all the above. And then the last thing is just demonstrating courage. As you attain those levels of success that we're all striving for, inevitably, we all know, if you were in this group, like, you understand that it takes getting uncomfortable to get something that you haven't had before, right? And it takes courage to make the decision to act and to actually pursue those actions and complete those actions, right? So high performers just demonstrate that courage more often than average performers. Now, I've kind of alluded to this a little bit, but the Institute defined high performance as succeeding above standard norms consistently over the long term, all while maintaining well-being and positive relationships, right? So it's kind of like, it feels like that full engagement, that joy and that confidence that comes from giving your absolute best. That's kind of what high performance feels like. Maybe you can relate, like you're working on this project that you just feel absolutely fully engaged in, and it just boosts your fulfillment. You love what you're doing, and you know that you're good at it. Your confidence is just through the roof. That's what high performance feels like. So the purpose of this study is to really understand what brings that about and how can we get more of it, right? How can we get more in our lives on a daily basis in every different project that we're working on, every different area of our lives, whether, maybe most of my clients, they come to me to get business growth. But what's interesting is that everything we're working on to improve the business is it's also going to boost their relationships. It's going to boost their health and their performance in those areas. So all these things are malleable, they're trainable, etc. So here's what's interesting. Most people think about high performance, they think about genetic, they think about gender, race, all of these things that we don't control. And the fact of the matter is, high performance, it's actually not strongly correlated with age, gender, nationality, intelligence, personality, strengths, creativity, empathy, years of experience, or compensation. Not to say those don't play a role, but it is not a strong driver, and it's not strongly correlated with high performance and long-term success. It's also not all about strengths either. Like, you can have all the strengths in the world, but without the right habits, you're not going to get anything done. And I found this extremely interesting. High performers do not report working on their strengths any more than other people do, right? They just ask better questions. I say this all the time. If you want better answers, start asking better questions, right? And the question they ask is less often, who am I and what am I good at? And more often, what's it required to be of service here? And how can I grow into that? I love this because I'm a big believer in servant leadership. You know, my number one life pillar is impact over income. And this is so in line with what I believe personally. And I just remember reading this the first time. I'm like, damn, that's awesome. Like that, I can vibe with that. I can vibe with this work. So again, the real question becomes, how did high performers get that way? How did they develop those habits? Right? How do they keep growing and succeed long-term? So I want to jump into a little bit of my story to kind of like bring all of these words on a screen to real life. And again, I'm not a big fan of this because I didn't get in this work to put myself on a screen, but I think it's important to illustrate like real results that that can be generated in any area of life from this work in particular. So, you know, I mentioned this a couple times. You know, my old story, right? I was a young software engineer. I got into software engineering right after college, and I was doing well. I was rising up the corporate ladder. You know, I either had a big promotion or a big raise every single year during my tenure there. But the fact of the matter is, I was extremely unfulfilled, and ultimately, it led to a pretty severe struggle with anxiety and panic attacks in my early 20s. And it was frustrating because I didn't know anyone who had ever been through that, and no one could really tell me what was going on. I remember going to, oddly enough, my new office that I'm in right now is in the same complex as the hospital that I went to to get like my chest x-rayed and get breathing exams done to try and figure out like why my lungs didn't feel like I was working. Because if anyone can relate to this, it's like you feel like this insane pressure on your chest, right? You feel like you can't breathe. And a lot of this was, you know, I was trying to build businesses part-time while I was in corporate America, and I was making a lot of money, but I was just insanely unfulfilled, right? But then I found this work, and well, actually, let me go back to that for a second, because I talked about how productivity was my gateway drug to high performance. And the reason for that is what I realized is I felt these anxiety attacks and panic attacks. I experienced them the most when I felt guilty for not working. And I started to unravel that. I really started to like dig into that. Like I was like at the time, like 23 years old. Like, why should I feel guilty that I went out the night before and had some fun with friends? And maybe I needed to take a day off on Sunday and sit on the couch and watch TV or watch Captain Phillips. I remember I really wanted to watch this movie, Captain Phillips, and the movie's ruined for me because I had a panic attack in the middle of it. And like, why do I feel this at that moment? And what I realized is I felt guilty because I wasn't working. And the more I dug into that, I realized, man, if I could show up more powerfully when I was working and get a better mind frame around that, maybe I could have avoided a lot of the struggle I went through. So that leads me to the new story. I dove into productivity, figuring out how to get more out of my time, how to show up more powerfully. And that led me to this world of this work. And I'm so freaking grateful for it. But it led to my new story, right? You know, at the time I had reached that coveted 6-figure salary. I was a senior engineer by the age of 25 at a big international company in New York City, but that didn't give me fuel. Like it didn't give me life. I was solving problems that I wasn't passionate about. It wasn't helping me sleep at night. And ultimately I was able to leave corporate America and take my business full time as a result of this work, right? And more importantly than anything, I have a better frame of reference around my thoughts. I experience anxiety far less frequently, and I haven't had a full-blown panic attack in over 3 years, which is amazing. I probably need to update that number because I haven't run this webinar in a while, but it's been a very long time, and I credit a ton of that to this work. Now, what I want to really highlight here is, again, I mentioned this before, a lot of my clients come to work with me because of like business growth that they're striving for, but this work can be applied everywhere. So I want to talk about a couple different areas of my life outside of business that it really changed the game for me. And the first one obviously is fitness, right? So a number of years ago, on the left of this picture is absolute worst shape I've ever been in my life. I was probably close to 200 and almost 240 pounds. I'm 6'5" to give you a frame of reference, but just not in good shape. And by applying this work to the fitness world of my life, I was able to complete, by one, applying this work, and two, seeking mentorship in the right space by someone who really knew what they were doing. I completed a full body recomposition, losing about 35 pounds of body fat, not body mass, because I put on a ton of muscle in this process. I've lost 35 pounds of fat alone in 11 months. And like, I don't know, I probably won't look like this for a while. Like I literally got so skinny that I found a hernia because I was like, my abs are not, they're not symmetrical right now. Let me get it checked out. And then I got the hernia fixed, and oddly enough, ended up in powerlifting, but that's another story. But like, that's what I wanted to do. And I was able to apply this work to that area of my life. And I accomplished like better results that I literally have ever had in, at this point, like my 27 years on this planet. So, I then moved into the powerlifting world. I'm like, you know what? I'm done losing a ton of weight. I want to get super strong. I was a goalkeeper in soccer, and our claim to fame is it's almost like a license to be crazy. Like, you can't be a goalkeeper if you don't have a couple screws loose. So that mentality really ports over to powerlifting very, very well. And deadlift, as you can see in this picture, it happens to be my best lift. So I decided to start powerlifting. And this number is actually inaccurate. I should have changed this. But in this photo, this is a 501 pound deadlift. I've actually hit 540 since then. And I'm on track to hopefully get close to, if not crushing, 606 pounds in November at my next competition. And again, different area of fitness, different area of life, but same work, same mindset, same habits can generate this kind of growth. But then there's also the lifestyle side of it, right? Like, not everything is gym, not everything is business. There's also things that we want to create in our lives. And by leveraging this sort of work, I was able to create a life where I could go where I wanted. I had made the decisions and put in the work and applied these habits and these practices and created results that allowed me the opportunities to, in the top left, I'm in Florence, Italy with my sister. She was studying in Milan, and right when she was done with her semester, my folks and I, we flew out there and visited her and went all around Italy and London, which was amazing. In the bottom, you could see London. My sister and I in front of the bridge here. In the top middle, it's me sitting on the beach in Jamaica, literally a couple days after my first powerlifting competition. Actually, my cousin and I decided, hey, let's fly out and spend a couple days over there before I got ready for a big launch of my program. And then on the right, this actually is the worst picture of all of them, but it's the most impactful. This is me standing on top of a 50-foot telephone pole in torrential downpours in the middle of Fiji. And that's actually the moment when I decided that I was not only going to, but I was also capable of leaving corporate America and walking away from a lot of money to build a business or continue to build my business full time. I love that. I wish I could spent the time to figure out how to put the video in here, but incredible opportunity. And had I not been able to apply this work, I wouldn't have been able to create this. So enough about me. The question remains, how did high performers get that way? How did they develop these habits? And how do they keep growing and succeeding long term? Okay, so let's jump into these 6 pillars. The answer is successful people sought breakthroughs and training and coaching in 6 critical areas. Okay, they're what we call the high performance pillars. They had to master these. Now, how do we get there? Mastering the pillars of high performance. So these are the pillars right here. And again, I'm gonna have to move this Zoom thing again. Maybe I can, bear with me. There we go. I was able to move it. Not that I don't want to see all of you guys' beautiful faces, but I want to make sure that I'm not saying absolute gibberish and that I have these things in here. So the pillars: productivity, people, psychology, physiology, purpose, and presence. Okay, so let's dive into them. Let's see how you measure up and how fast you can dramatically improve. So let's start with psychology. And again, I mentioned this before. If you want better answers, start asking better questions. And what you'll find is everything that we're going to do from here on out is going to be heavily question driven. The work that I do with my clients at a one-on-one level is very much conversational. It's open dialogue, but the questions are very powerful, right? The structure, the conversations, they're all backed by science because of the questions, okay? But the questions drive those conversations. So if a question resonates, make a note. You guys will have this replay, but make a note and spend the time to actually explore the question. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give you guys. I'm going to share a bunch of really powerful questions right now, and it'll be great to get you thinking in this moment, but I'll be perfectly honest, nothing will change if you do not take the time to actually explore these questions, because they're going to be things that are very simple to be like, oh yeah, I thought about that. But the fact of the matter is, and I'm not calling people out here, I'm just saying what I've found in my experience in this industry is that most people, they think that they've thought about it. And that sounds weird, but people actually haven't put pen to paper to really explore and dig into these questions because they think about it surface level. But what I'll tell you is the breakthrough happens when you really dig. You go deeper on a simple question, right? You go down the rabbit hole and you find what's actually holding you back. So that would be my piece of advice. If a question resonates, make a note of it and block out time in the calendar to actually explore it, like really explore it and really think about it. But let's dive into these. Psychology. Am I living my truth? Do my thoughts serve me? Do I feel the confidence and joy I always wanted at this stage of my life? Super powerful questions. And honestly, it's very simple. It's very common and very easy for us to kind of sway off track. You know, if we're not capable, it's very easy to think that life's happening to us instead of for us. And these questions can really help you get back on track with that. What 3 words really define who I am as a person? And am I living congruently with those words? And am I living consistently? Really, really powerful questions, guys. Let's jump into physiology. Do I feel an extraordinary level of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual energy? I love this question because we think of energy and, you know, maybe you're different, but for me, I always really think about physical, maybe mental, right? Maybe, you know, if you're I was a software engineer in a previous life, right? Maybe if you're in that sort of space, maybe you think about mental energy as well, because that work is not physically demanding, but you'll be exhausted at the end of the day because thinking can be difficult sometimes, right? So I love this because it really brings in those other areas and it really focuses that there are different areas of energy. This is a great question. Am I sleeping, eating, exercising, hydrating, gesturing, and speaking with enough passion to generate the emotions and power I desire? That generate piece. So powerful. Right? All of these things that you're doing can actually generate the emotions and the power that you desire. So what does that look like? Some common ones: sleeping, eating, and exercising, hydrating, all these things. Like, these are pretty common. I think they get neglected often, but at least people think about them sometimes. But the gesturing and speaking part, man, that blew my mind when I first heard that. So I love that. Productivity. This is my baby. I love productivity. When I first jumped into the coaching space, it was around productivity. Obviously, I explained that it played a huge role in my journey, but these are really important questions. Usually when people think about productivity, usually they think about like checking things off at a to-do list. And I have no vendetta against to-do lists. They're really great. They're great tools so long as you actually fill them with things that matter, right? And not just things that need to get done. So really powerful questions about productivity. Am I doing my life's work, or am I just doing busy work? Kind of alludes to what I just mentioned, like the stuff that we fill these to-do lists with. Are they actually in line with what you want to create with your life? Or are they just busy work so that you can get the gratification of checking them off and get that dopamine hit as you check the thing off the to-do list, but you don't actually make progress towards your goals and your dreams? Right? It's a really powerful question. What would it take to 5x my productivity each week? Like, what would you need to do? Maybe time block, great practice that happy to dive into later in questions if you guys want to talk about that. Maybe, I always talk about starving distractions, right? Maybe it's this thing right here. I got an alarm. Where are you choosing from? It's one of my alarms every day. But like, maybe it's the phone. Maybe you need to turn the phone on, do not disturb, or put it in a different room. If I was in my office right now, I have a desk drawer, I'd probably put it in there. What would it actually take to 5x your productivity each week? Start exploring options, generate options. What major projects must I achieve in the next 90 days with absolute excellence? Right? What does that look like? And how can you live intentionally towards it? The more we can ask these more powerful questions, the better we're going to be able to sculpt the reality that we're trying to bring in both our lives and our business. Let's jump into people. I love this one because, for me, again, I keep saying this because it's relevant to my life, and it's all I can really speak about is my experience. But I was a software engineer, and that's like your typical, you think about the kid with the hoodie up, the headphones on, just tucked away in a dark room, just staring at a big computer screen, keyboard thrashing, right? But the fact of the matter is, guys, no matter what it is that you do, it doesn't matter what industry or what business you think you're in the people business, right? No matter what it is that you're doing, even if you're that guy or girl writing the code, someone needs to consume that code, right? So maybe you need to be able to work with your project manager to communicate what needs to be done to bring that to life away from your work. Even if it's just communicating with one person, or maybe you're building a product or service and someone else is dealing with the people facing front, you still need to communicate with that person, right? So these are really powerful questions that people think that aren't, sometimes they think it's not really necessary for them. But I assure you that it is, okay? So first question is, have I developed the people skills needed to serve and lead, right? Can I influence and persuade people to believe in me, buy from me, follow me, invest in me, support me, all the above? Like, no matter what it is that you're trying to create, do you have the influence to persuade people? Because the fact of the matter is, if we can't do that, then no matter how good we are, what's it for if we don't have people to help with it, right? What is it all for if we can't share our gifts in the benefit of some other people? It's my belief, at least. And the last one, I love this question. Am I the role model my family needs me to be? Right? And if you don't have a family, maybe am I the role model that my circle needs me to be? Am I the role model that this group needs me to be? Am I the role model that my peers need me to be? Think about that. When you reframe some of these questions, everything changes. And sometimes it's like a 1 millimeter shift. But hopefully some of these questions are valuable. And again, I want to reaffirm this. If a question resonates, make a note, okay? And take the time to actually explore it. More than like 30 seconds. Okay? Because that's what most people do, and that's why most people get average results. We're here on this webinar, like people like you and I who invest time in growing ourselves. You're on this webinar because you want to grow. And we're seeking that next level of high performance. And high performers, like, these are not difficult questions to ask. They're not difficult habits to build, but high performers just do it more frequently, okay? Let's jump into presence. Am I fully engaging in life? Or am I just kind of sitting in the back seat? What am I avoiding? Man, that question hits, huh? I feel like we all have something that we're avoiding, we're procrastinating on. Maybe we're a little afraid of taking action on. What are you avoiding? Who needs me to show up on my A game? And I would extend this one. And what happens if I don't? What would life feel like if I was more in the now? How would things change? How would your impact change? How would your relationships change? Powerful questions. And the last one's purpose. How do I stay on my unique path despite all of the distractions? Because we live in the information age, right? Or, well, people want to call it the information age, but what I like to call it is we live in the age of distraction. And like, even when I went to just show you with a phone, there's like 100, well, not 100, like 6 or 7 different notifications here. Everything in our lives is grasping for our attention. It is the most sought after commodity. There's a reason that people are paying teenagers thousands of dollars, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars to promote a product for them, because these kids have millions of eyeballs paying attention to them. So I say that to illustrate this. If we want to live intentionally towards creating the life we really want, building our goals or accomplishing our goals, building our dreams, right? Achieving the level of impact that we're trying to achieve through our product or service or our businesses. If we want to actually accomplish that, we're going to need to get really good about starving out distractions. So this question becomes insanely powerful. How do I stay on my unique path despite all the distractions? How do I get rid of the distractions? How do I keep living my life on purpose instead of passively? How do I really know what that path really is? Talked about clarity being the cornerstone habit. These are great questions for clarity. When should I quit something versus stick with it? Good questions, man. The last one's, what makes me feel fully alive so that I can give? Again, we talked about that question that high performers ask. This idea of like, what can I do to be of service? How can I be of service in this moment right now? I love this question because it really closes the loop on that. What makes me feel fully alive so that I can give? Love that. Because most people think that, they just give and they give and they give, and they think that giving, the best way to give is to be by pouring out their cup, rather than figuring out how to fill their cup so dang much that there's this abundant overflow and filling others with the overflow, right? This last question is super powerful about that. Same exact idea. So these are all old things. I'm going to end the screen share here and we can jump into questions. But guys, I really want to firm up, before we jump into questions, I want to firm up that last piece. Like, man, it's so easy to think that we're thinking about these questions. And nothing we just talked about is rocket science, right? Nothing. There are things that are very easy to do, but they're very easy not to do. And common sense is not always common practice. So high performers get that way because they just do these things consistently. They do them more, right? Anyone can seek clarity. High performers just seek clarity more often and more consistently. That's it. So if questions resonated, I'm happy to answer any questions that I can right now. But if any of the questions I just shared with you guys resonate, block out time in the calendar. I can't remember who it was that was speaking. I think it might have been Keith Cunningham, who, if you've ever read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Keith Cunningham is the rich dad. Super successful dude. I was down in Fiji at Tony Robbins' Life and Wealth Mastery, and I think it was Keith. If not, I just give him credit for this all the time, which whatever, he deserves credit no matter what. But he talked about this idea that he was sitting with this guy who it like took forever to get a meeting with him. Insanely successful guy, billionaire, like crazy money, super successful. And he talked about how he literally blocks out time in his calendar to think. When's the last time any of us have done that? Right? So use that practice with this stuff, because I'll tell you what, these questions, they're simple, but if you actually spend the time to dig into them, they'll change the game. So with that, I want to bring it back over to Christopher, and happy to spend however much time we need to dive into questions.
Well, I'll start out with one. I know some other people probably have one too, but the question I have is, how do I power up when I don't feel like it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about that today because there's a woman named Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins, super successful woman. She used to be a really successful, I think, like litigator in law in New York City. And either way, she's ultimately come up with something called the 5-second rule. She was being interviewed on all these podcasts, and I'm a huge fan of hers. She's really, really awesome. But people always talk about motivation, right? As like being the solution, or like this and that. And what she says is, and I'll keep this PG, so I'll just I'll abbreviate some of her curse words, but she says motivation is BS, right? And I actually used that as the opening phrase of a talk I gave, and I did not abbreviate it, so you can imagine what the faces looked like in that crowd. But the message is basically like, we're conditioned to make it seem like we're going to feel ready to do something, right? We're going to feel ready to leave the job, or we're going to feel ready to start the business, or we're going to feel ready to make the sales call. And I alluded to this at the beginning, like it might've been before we even press record. Like people, like we're on this call, people like you and I are here because we want to grow, and we understand that in order to grow, it's going to take getting uncomfortable. And when you take that into account, getting uncomfortable, like we're not going to feel like we want to do that. We might really want what we're striving for, but some of these things are hard. So it's about building the discipline to actually execute on it. Like, what are you going to do when you don't have the energy, but you need to make the sales calls, you need to do this or that because you have a team of employees that are depending on you. If you don't hit revenue, you're not going to be able to hit payroll, and then you're affecting 50 different families. Like, what does that do? That raises necessity, one of the high performance habits we talked about. So, but it really comes down to the discipline of taking the action. So for me, I saw someone comment strong why. Really, really powerful. You need to be super grounded with what actually matters. Like, why are you doing this? And it can't be about money. It absolutely cannot be about money. That'll help, but it's not powerful enough. Why do you want the money? What's the impact you want to have? What opportunity do you want to create for the people you care about? What experiences do you want to be able to afford, both time and financial? Get super strongly wired with why you actually want to do what you do. But again, that's not always going to be enough to pull you. Right? Sometimes you need to just have a practice in place to have the discipline to go. And I think that the 5-second rule, Mel Robbins' tactic that I mentioned before, is by far the simplest. I love when things are backed by science because I'm a nerd. So it is the simplest thing that I've ever heard about. And literally you're tricking your brain into taking action and going. The results, if you've ever read the book the book 5-second rule by Mel Robbins, like the lives that have changed as a result of something so simple and seemingly silly. She literally didn't share this with the world for years because she was ashamed. She was like, why does this silly thing work for me? And then it changed people's lives. People who were like quite literally suicidal, about to jump, and they leveraged this tool to save their own lives. I'll put it super, super simply. 5-second rule is literally you count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And not to go into too much science, but basically there's nowhere else to go. There's no numbers below, right? So that's why it works. It tricks your brain into going, and all you have to do is just take the action before you get to 1. That's it. And it hacks your decision making. That's why you don't count upwards, because you can keep going. By going down, there's nowhere else to go but execute. So that would be my advice. Like someone mentioned in the comments, get super wired to a strong why you're trying to do it before, why you're trying to go, why you're trying to create, and then have that little bit of discipline to leverage something like the 5-second rule, because you're not always going to feel like you're ready to do anything.
Before I ask you another question, anyone else have a question before I jump on here again? How does one overcome the fear of failure? But even more specifically, many times as an entrepreneur, you actually experience the fear of success.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I've never experienced the fear of success. Maybe I'm not thinking big enough yet. But for me, fear is fear. And there's a couple different ways that you can approach it. Like, I know some of my really good buddies and colleagues in the space, they just have a firm process of, when you feel the fear, like you use that as your compass. There's a great book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And he talks about this concept of resistance, right? And resistance is kind of like fear. It's anything that's kind of pushing against our execution towards what we want to create. And Honestly, I read that book because I was like, I always labeled myself as an engineer and I thought I wasn't creative. And I wanted to really put a priority on that. But what I found is using that resistance as a compass is really powerful, and kind of leaning into that, right? But it's still difficult to take action. And that's when you can kind of leverage something like the 5-second rule, right? To hack that decision making and do what you know you need to do, even when you don't know how to do it, or don't know why you need to do it, or you just don't feel like it, right? So that would be one piece of advice is, you kind of just, you got to use it as a compass. Like if there's a piece of action that you're fearful of, it's usually a good indication that you probably should do it.
Now,
Obviously some like edge case.
You're speaking
Sorry.
to the fear of failure right now, right?
I'm speaking to all of it. So when you think about the fear of failure, well, let's dissect that. When you're afraid of failing, sometimes you just need to ask different questions. Like, what happens? Like, what's the worst case scenario? Like when you really dig down, what's important? And then what's in line with that? So every time I've ever been afraid of failure, it's like, okay, well, what happens when I fail? Someone makes fun of me. Cool. People were already making fun of me. So what changed? Right. And is this in line with what I really want to create? There's always going to be people on the sidelines talking and like talking down on what you're trying to create. So I might as well live in alignment with what I'm trying to create and the impact I'm trying to have, because people are going to talk smack about me no matter what. But when you really boil it down, like fear of failure, I think is like a blanket statement. And I think we need to get a little bit more specific about what we're fearful of. And when you get a little bit more specific, you can actually kind of take some action on it. But fear in general, it's kind of like a compass. When you're fearful of a certain type of action, you should probably lean in and kind of take that action. And then the interesting thing that I always love is I love to just hack fear. That's kind of my favorite thing to do. It's why fear hacking was the first program I ever built. And really all that is, it's in its simplistic form, decisions are emotional. They're not logical. And I mentioned this before, it becomes pain versus pleasure. So let's manufacture something that will draw a lot of pain and drive the decision making. If that's of interest, I have a course on that. I'm happy to share with you guys. And it's a really powerful thing, but
I can boil down the fear of failure in fairly specific terms. Again, as entrepreneurs, sometimes we must make a sizable investment in our program or our future, and it oftentimes is in unproven ground. In other words, we're walking from the firm soil to the quicksand, possibly. So
yep.
That fear of failure not only is for your pride, but in fact, it could be for your entire future financially.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to preface this with I'm not the guy to go to for financial advice. Nothing I do makes sense on paper, and I'm cool with that because it vibes with my mentality. But what I'll say is, because I've experienced that in the last 18 months, I've probably invested somewhere between 65 and 75 grand in myself and my business. And that's scary as hell. I remember writing that first check for 10 grand. And I was just like, what just happened? Like, I was still in corporate America. I was making really good money, but I was scared out of my mind to do that. But I knew I needed to do it. And what's important is it might not pan out, but I always just reframe it very, very simply. If I'm not willing to bet on myself, how the hell can I expect anybody else to? Right? If I'm not willing to invest in me, why would anybody else? So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of my mindset around it. It's like, I can look at a lot of investments I made in the last 12 months, and not a lot of them yielded any, or a lot of them rather, have not yielded any positive ROI in my business, but I built a relationship that I'll never get back. Right. And all these things, like there's something that you can take from everything, and it might not be the results that you're looking for, but they all kind of set you on this path, right? And I don't know, like I'd be nowhere near where I am right now had I not made those investments, and I did not get the business growth I expected out of 95% out of them. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of just ranting, but I get it.
I assume you felt some fear at that point, though, didn't you?
Oh, for sure. For sure. But I kind of used it as the compass, like I was mentioning. I was like, you know what? You step back to clarity. It's like, what do I want to create? Is this in alignment? Cool. Do it anyway.
Okay.
That's how I think.
I see Rick has a question. Rick, go ahead, buddy.
Just a question on, aside from the Mel Robbins 5-Second Rule book, which two other books had the most impact on your life? I always like to hear.
Yeah.
You can judge somebody by the books they're reading, but aside from what you're reading, which two had the most impact on your career?
Yeah. Number one is a book called The Go-Giver by Bob Burg and John David Mann.
Know it well.
Incredible book.
We actually had a session on that earlier.
We did a training session on that earlier.
Love it. Love it. My uncle sent me that book, and that book changed my life, right? Because I always had this concept of impact over income. Like that's what I believed. But that book really helped me firm up this concept that I know the life I want to create, right? And then the book helped me realize, okay, well, I know that the life I want to create, I know that I need a lot of money to create that life. The book helped me realize that it really firmed up the concept of my income will always be directly proportional to the number of lives I touch in a positive way. And it just helped me pull it all together. So I love that book. That is the book I recommend more than anything else in the world. Even more than like something like Think and Grow Rich, which most people always recommend, is like the OG personal development book. So number one would be The Go-Giver. And then number two would probably be As a Man Thinketh by James Allen.
Okay.
Old school book, but I used to practice something called Take 5 in my morning routine, which is basically 5 minutes that helps you start off your day properly. And one of those minutes is take a minute to read something positive. And I knew that I could just flip open that book to any page and just read a page, and it would be positive, something to feed my mind to start the day. So that was really big for me. It's really tough to only pick two, but those would be two that come to mind immediately.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I got some questions from Scott that came in to me privately. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Dude, yeah. I read Can't Hurt Me this year. One of the most savage books I've ever read in my life. Like, I think very aggressively, and it's nothing compared to David Goggins. If you don't know David Goggins, man, you guys got to look into that book. That's wild. Scott, I know that you posted a couple questions. Do you want to come on? You can just reframe them or question, ask them here.
Sure. Well, the first thing for me on fear is just to comment on that for me personally. I was taught to look at it as faulty evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
And it's lucky for me because I'm more of a logical thinker than an emotional thinker. So looking at failure, I look at that I generate results. There's no failure, there's just results. And if I continue to move forward, no matter what the obstacles are, I'm still moving forward. And another thing that really helps me, I'm really fortunate that due to some personal experience, I live in 24-hour segments. So I always imagine I'm going to die at midnight. So whatever can happen during today, it's all small stuff. So, and David Goggins is a beast. I've gotten more out of that book, Facing Fear, than, and again, I've posted about the why. If my why is big enough, then most of the time I can overcome any of the fears that have come about in my way. I've been a personal growth junkie for a long time now, so I'm a big fan of all the books that you read. Love Brendan, big fan of Anthony Robbins, and I love the James Allen book. So we've been reading and thinking along the same lines for a while now. So I'm really glad to hear those those books coming out of your mouth when you're talking about things, and really enjoy what you've had to say today.
Awesome. I'm glad it was valuable. Appreciate that, Scott.
Yep. Thank you.
Mike, how do you gesture with passion? I know how you can speak with passion, but you mentioned in one of your statements that you need to gesture with passion.
Yeah.
Is that a New York thing or what?
I mean, it might be New York, but if you guys could see my little screen while I was sharing I don't know, could you see my video while I was sharing the screen?
We can see you while you were sharing the screen, yes.
Yeah, so if you watched me, like there are certain areas where like I was just snapping or I was like hitting my hand. Like those are, I don't know, for me, that's how I illustrate what I'm talking about, which is kind of interesting for me to learn. Because to give you context, I'm 6'5", like I mentioned before, and man, like my MO was, I was just super monotonous, both facial expression and tonality. That's just how I was for like probably 23 years, 24 years of my life. And when I turned 24, I probably, started to prioritize it a little bit more. So it was something I really had to learn. But it's kind of just your presence, right? How are you showing up? When you enter a room, what kind of speaks for you? What is that's being communicated? And it's not necessarily doing what I do, which is like snapping or hitting my hand or like illustrating myself a little bit more powerfully as I would view it. But that's unique to everybody. But it's like kind of how you carry yourself when you enter a situation, when you're on a stage speaking, when you're on a call like this, when you're on a sales call, like all the above.
Bob, you always have some insightful questions. Do you have anything on your mind today? Okay, maybe Bob may have stepped away. Does anyone else have any questions before I ask?
Maybe he's meditating.
Bob, yeah, Bob's really meditating. That's right. Yes.
Well, he better be working on that thingamajig.
Yeah. Judith, anything there?
Okay, to be honest, there's so much I don't even know where to begin with.
Sorry, Christopher, my AirPods died and now they are. I'm just making sure that.
So you can hear everything all right, Mike, or not?
Yeah, okay, they're working now. I had to just change preferences really quickly. Sorry about that.
That's okay. As I mentioned as I commented on your page, God help me. And you're like, what? There's just so much of this that applies to me. Long in the tooth, but I didn't grow up with any of this. And so it's a lot of catching up to do. Mm-hmm. Focusing is an extreme problem that I have for various reasons, not the least of which is probably age and the consequences of a parasite that I caught in India. So it really messes up the focusing. Do you have any advice about focusing or that kind of thing? Because, if you can't focus, you're kind of dead in the water. You're just all over the place. And you're not really accomplishing anything. You're spinning your wheels.
Yeah. So what's the biggest pain point when it comes to focusing? Like, are you just losing your train of thought? Is something interrupting? Like, give me a little bit of a better idea.
Not being able to choose something and follow it through to the end result, because they're all, the distractions, which I'm learning now, turn the phone off, do different things. I think that I've made some headway that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I lost my train of thought. What can I say? See how much help I
need? Okay.
Gone in 60 seconds.
Got it. Well, I think the biggest thing that, like you mentioned, it's like the picking part, right? for me, I was posting on this, I think in like Dean Graziosi's group earlier today. Someone was asking about, procrastination. And I mentioned like, sometimes it comes down to the question of like, do you trust that your time should be spent on it? Right?
Do you trust?
Do you trust that your time should be spent on something? And
Validating.
I'll give you a personal example. For a while, I mentioned time blocking during the talk. Like for a while, I was time blocking my schedule, and there was like a couple of weeks span where I was just really struggling to actually keep my word to myself that I would show up for each time block, and I would let things linger into the next time block instead of pivoting like I had told myself I would as I was creating my calendar. And for me, that became a question of, I didn't actually believe that I needed to spend the time to do each one of those things, because I was just kind of going through the motions when I was building the time block. And this might seem irrelevant, but I think that it's fairly relevant to what you're talking about, because when you have that clarity, again, we mentioned that clarity is like the cornerstone habit. When you have the clarity, everything rises, including productivity, including focus, including energy, all of it, because you're living intentionally towards what you want to create. So I'm not saying that this is the case always, but you mentioned like picking what you want to do and maybe spending a little bit more time on the choosing of those things. Like what is most in alignment with what you want to create? Because when you have that little bit more confidence, I think that it's my belief that you'll be dialed in a little bit more. And then there, obviously you mentioned the parasite and stuff like that. And there's a lot of moving pieces, but just we do what we can and we continue to grow and we take the next step and the next step and the next step. So that might be a good step to take.
I think certainly the clarity is an issue to start with, and analyzing really what should I be doing? What is my next best move? And then just get at it.
Yeah, exactly. Leverage that 5-second rule. Take the time, get clear, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
And finish.
Exactly. Go and go and go and go and go until you're done.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, Mike, with certainly we're talking about people that are growing their businesses. We have people at all levels, from the those just getting into the business to truly long-term advocators of the digital marketing business. Is there any difference between the startup and the experience when it comes to productivity?
Can you say that last part again? It broke up literally at the last word. When it comes to what?
Is there a different approach that a person new into business should take as opposed to someone who has been in business for, say, a decade? What approach? Are there different approaches to productivity for those two different types of people in the business world?
No. When it comes to productivity, no. Obviously, there's levels to everything, but if you're just starting in this sort of work, everyone should be doing the same thing. You're just doing it and applying. It's like you're taking your telescope, right? And you're just aiming it in a different direction. You're just deciding what you're going to aim it at. And that's the direction is the only thing that changes no matter what element or stage of the business that you're at. But when it comes to the actual execution of the work in productivity, influence, courage, energy, clarity, like necessity, all these things, no, it's most important thing is just doing it. Taking the time to get clear, taking the time to build in some of the strategies for each of the different habits, all these things, and then just figure out where it directs, and the maturity of the business will indicate where you're going to direct it. But the habits are the same. They're trainable, they're malleable. No matter where you're starting from, you can build them.
I noticed a statement from Scott in the group, and that statement was basically he's happy to hear someone talking about working on you as much or more as working on your business. Is that the is that in line with the way you teach?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because it depends on who you watch, but I know Dean Graziosi talks about this all the time. You sell people what they want and then you deliver what they need. I mean, obviously maintaining integrity, right? We're not over promising and under delivering or anything of that nature. We're not doing bait and switch, but like people want business growth, right? So that's why you look at my Facebook, my tagline is about business growth. But what they don't realize is that we're also going to make the rest of their life pretty freaking awesome too, while we double their business. So not everyone would want to have a conversation about boosting happiness and fulfillment because they're right in their mind frame. It's just like, I need to grow my business. That's all that matters. Like, I'm not going to spend money. I'm not going to invest at a high level to grow me. Like, not everyone makes the connection, but all of it's about you because you're the vehicle, right? I don't know what industries everyone is on here. I'd imagine a lot of digital marketers, like you mentioned, Christopher, but you know, if you're a business owner or a business operator, like you are the brand, you are the business. So why wouldn't we focus on us? I don't know. That's just the way I think, but yeah, it's all about working on you and improving how you show up. Because if your business has systems in place and it's ready to scale, the only thing that changes is how you show up to boost everything. That's why I work with digital marketers. Like, I'm not a digital marketing guy. I don't have the systems to put in place. I just take digital marketers who are ready to scale. They know they're capable of more, but they feel like they're maxed out in their schedule. I help them show up more powerfully. That's how I help digital marketers scale the hell out of their business. It's not by giving them systems or teaching them how to market better. They're the expert in that space. I'm the expert in the performance space. And that starts with how you show up. It starts with a you. So we always work on the individual.
How you show up. That's an excellent tagline right there. How do you show up each day? You could even ask your client that. You might insult him if he had the wrong mood, but that's all right. We've had several people on here who have not asked a question. Maybe they don't have one, but if they do, I want to give you the opportunity now to go ahead and come on and ask that. Go ahead, unmute yourself, and please go ahead and ask your question. Does anyone have one that they want to put in front of Mike here this afternoon?
Yeah, feel free to light me up with questions, guys. I'm here for you. So,
okay, I will move in this direction. I would hope everyone has a pen and a pad close by, because I'm going to ask Mike to do us this one favor, and that is, as far as he is concerned, in light of his profession and knowing what businesses need to do, what are I'm just going to use the top 5 actionable things that the people watching this video, either now, live, or in a replay, what are the 5 things that they can do to improve not only their productivity, but their actual performance? Can you do that for me?
Yeah. I'll make it even easier for you guys. I'll just give you a link where you can just download, because I have a 7-day productivity boost. So I'm not going to give you 5. I'll give you 7. Okay. And it's my name, MikeCzesniak.com/free. I think that is. I haven't used that URL in a while. It should be available still, but jump into there. And actually, it's also part of the giveaway I had for you guys. So, but to dive in, like, there's tons of different areas around productivity. I dive into that. We dive into energy a lot in that productivity boost, because I think they're very tightly coupled. But I would just defer to that. No sense reinventing the wheel if we don't need to, right? But what we talk about in that productivity boost is a lot of the same stuff: seeking clarity, generating energy, boosting productivity, and then developing influence and all of the above, courage, etc. So I would just defer to that. Again, it's completely free. And if you guys do feel like wanting the free gift that I'm going to share with you at the end of it, it'll be delivered to you in an email as well. So that's how I would answer that.
Okay, and for those of you who are paying attention, says his last name is on screen, or will be when he comes back in here. So be sure and spell it carefully, all right? So it's MikeSczesniak.com/free. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Let me actually test that while we got everyone on here. MikeSczesniak.com/free.
Looks like it's not working.
Yep. Yeah, just make sure to put www in there and it works.
Okay.
And I'll have to be honest with you. I did practice his name before coming on several times. So.
Yeah, I usually have to spell it out phonetically, just like you asked for it, Christopher. So it's imagine trying to learn to spell that as a kid.
No, thank you. I'll pass on that. All right. So that section 3 answers my questions as far as the main takeaways from our session today, which I certainly appreciate. But I don't want to stop you there. Go right ahead, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to extend something for you guys, because if this training is valuable, I think that the inner circle that I'm doing will be valuable as well. And really quickly what that is I give people access to trainings that normally cost thousands of dollars at a super low cost rate. Right. And I'm really on a mission to scale my impact as much as possible. So if trainings around this type of stuff, high performance business, scaling in the digital age, building online, like those kind of things are very, very relevant to you guys, I'd love to invite you to, I just want to give you a free month in my inner circle, and just put a note in your calendar, like 30 days from now, as you opt in. If you don't feel like it's worth $17 a month, make a note to reach out to me and get it canceled so you don't get charged. But I just want to extend that to you guys. I did it for some of my warm audience as well, some of my network on social. So just as a thank you for jumping in and spending some time with me today. Hopefully this was valuable. And this is like a good indication of what the trainings look like. And there's no sense going into all the details. You can see it on the page when you jump into the link, but I go live in that group twice a week. One of them's a training just like this. The other one's a Q&A. And soon we're going to be bringing in experts, some of my network, people doing 7, 8, 9 figures in their industries, to come and share relevant information, share knowledge in different areas. So very high performance focused. So if that's of interest, you like this kind of information, you want to figure out how to show up powerfully so you can scale your business, I'm happy to share that with you guys. I will I'm going to just drop the link in here. It's the same website, MikeSczesniak.com/inner circle. And then that is the promo code. Free month. Throw that in there. It'll literally sub out a different product. Nothing will be charged for the first 30 days. So again, make a note, because if you don't feel it's worth $17, that's completely cool. And we'll get it taken care of before any charge goes through. But that's it. I wanted to share that with you guys. And hopefully this was valuable over the last hour and a half or so. Based on the comments, it seems like it was. So hopefully people watching the replay got a similar vibe. But Rick asked, how large is your tribe? So I actually just launched this. I launched this group maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago, and I didn't, probably more than that, maybe a month ago, but I haven't promoted it at all up until now. So there's literally about 15 people, 18 people in there right now. And what that means is we're in a process of scaling the heck out of that group. But right now the access level is super high, right? So all questions get answered, a lot of direct access to, not to put myself on a pedestal, but like, that's kind of like the point of these groups, right? You want access to the people running them because you get direct like feedback with the questions that you have and things of that nature. So I'm loving that part right now, and I'm really grateful for these early stages. But the plan is obviously to scale that we're business owners here. From a business perspective, I want to scale that astronomically because one, it's good for business growth, like revenue. And 2, it scales my impact. There's more people on the calls. There's more people that I can positively serve. So that's the mission of it. Right now we're at a really early stage though. So I'm just having fun with it.
Well, that's fantastic. I know we all appreciate that offer. I, for one, will definitely take advantage of it because I know there's much, much more to this than we've been able to cover in this brief period of time. Will this also be open to those that listen to the replay, Mike?
100%. 100%. And Judith and I actually connected on Facebook. I literally just launched this out to my Facebook audience. So that promo code is live, and I don't have, I'm not sure when I'm going to stop doing that for them, but I will, I'll leave this live for your audience, for anyone on the replay for sure. Even after I stop promoting it to my audience, I'll make sure the code is still available for them.
All right, very good. We appreciate it. Does anyone else have anything they would like to share, or any compliments for Mike for his great job today?
Yes, Mike definitely did a fantastic job. Very, very deep stuff, but I think he did a great job.
Awesome. I'm glad it was valuable.
Lots to think about, Mike. Thank you very, very much for all that insight.
You're welcome. Get time on the calendar. Put the time on the calendar, block it out, and really dive into these questions because they're simple. It's very simple to do, but it's very easy not to do. But I know that if you guys are still on this call, you're going to do it. Judith, I know you'll execute on it. I will.
Count on it. And I'll be in your group.
Awesome. I look forward to seeing a lot of you guys in there. We're having a lot of fun so far. So it's a different flavor than this kind of stuff that you guys probably have here. And hopefully synergistically, they'll be able to just give you guys all the value that you need to scale your business.
Are you meaning to say your group is more professional than we are? Is that what you're saying, Mike?
It chopped out right as you were saying that. I couldn't hear.
I said, are you meaning to say that your group is more professional than we are as far as our handling of our meetings? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
No, absolutely not. Man, I honestly, like, when you guys join, you're going to have access. Don't tell the public this because I haven't figured this out yet, but you guys will have access to every training that I've already done because they're all on Facebook Lives. And I'm pretty sure when you join the group, you get access to the group history. So, like, you'll have access to the last month's worth of trainings and Q&As if you want to dive in and do that. So, like, I haven't figured that out yet. I think I might move it to Kajabi so people can have, like, get access to, like, the previous 3 months or whatever it is. I don't know. It's not professional. Imperfect action, right? Like, I'm just trying to serve. So
absolutely.
Figuring it out as I go.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, I do have several more questions for you that I'd like to I'll make contact with you, though, off air in the process. And for right now, I want to thank everyone for attending today. And again, repeating myself, the wonderful job that Mike has done for us today. And with that being said, I wish everyone a great afternoon. Thank you very much, guys. See you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Great session, guys. Thank you.
Talk to you soon, Mike.
Take care, guys. Thanks again, Chris.
You're welcome, buddy.